applying scratching and chipping for weathering effects on Ron's Trains and Things right now. Hi, I'm Ron of Ron's Trains and Things, and if you'd like to see more model railroad tips, tools, and techniques, then be sure and subscribe down below and click the little bell icon so you can catch future videos. I recently attempted to do a live stream in which I demonstrated some techniques for chipping and scratching your models whenever weathering structures or rolling stock, specifically working with styrene. I was working with some products from MIG Ammo to create those effects. Well, unfortunately, my internet really pooped out on me that night, and the video was virtually unwatchable. You couldn't see much and you couldn't hear much. I really apologize for that. That's not the way I like to do a live stream. But this was such a great effect, and I knew that many of you would enjoy it and really benefit from it. So I came back and made a video on the same topic because I want you to see these effects. So we're going to go over to the workbench in a few moments, and I'm going to show you exactly how I prepare some pieces of styrene to create these chipping effects, and exactly how I do them using these products. And I think you'll really like the way it turns out. I think you're going to want to try this. And before we go over to the workbench, I want to tell you about some exciting new news I have for my channel that's going to impact you. I recently was accepted into the MicroMark Partnership Program, which means I'm now a MicroMark affiliate. What that means for you is that in the description of all of my videos from this time forward, there's going to be a link to MicroMark and a promo code in my descriptions. That promo code, by the way, is Ron's Trains, no spaces, no punctuation. I don't know about you, but I love to shop at MicroMark, the small tool specialists. I buy a lot of tools and supplies from MicroMark. And if you use that promo code, Ron's Trains, at checkout, any regularly priced items that you purchase with that, you'll get a 10% discount for using that promo code. Now, there are some exceptions. Those are spelled out in the description down below. But for the most part, that's a great discount. So I want you to be aware of that. Check out that link and the promo code in the description. Be sure and use it. You'll save yourself some money. I also want to take just a second to remind you about the Down and Dirty Weathering Contest 2 that's going on right now. I'm not going to take a lot of time to talk about that, but I've got several people who have entered. If you would like to enter, it's not too late. You still have a little over a month to get in by the deadline of March 3rd. And if you want a little more detail about that, you can either go to my Facebook page dedicated to the Down and Dirty Weathering Contest by going to Facebook and simply searching for Down in Dirty Contest and asking to join the group. Or you can just drop me an email at ronstrainsandthings@gmail.com. In either one of those places, you can get an official copy of the rules, the thumbnail that you're going to need, and the judging sheets. You'll be all set. Well, that's enough of the announcements for today. Let's head over to the workbench and do some chipping and scratching effects for weathering your rolling stock and structures. Simulated chipped and scratched paint is an integral part of weathering structures, locomotives, rolling stock, and other models. There are a variety of ways to simulate chipped and scratched paint, but the one I'm going to show you today is specifically for use on styrene and other plastics, and it is a progression of what some of you may know as the hairspray method. However, this process is going to use products that are easier to control and give more consistent results than hairspray. Specifically, today I am working with Ammo of MIG's Scratches Effects and Heavy Chipping Fluids, but there are similar products from other companies that will work equally well. For my demonstration, I'm using 3 scraps of styrene that I pulled out of my scrap box. I have marked them on the back, C for the Heavy Chipping Fluid, S for the Scratches Effects, and SP for a special effect that I will show you for those of you who do not have an airbrush. You can still use this method even if you're not using an airbrush. I taped the scraps to a handle for painting. Now I'm going to paint the base coat on all of these with an airbrush just for the sake of speed, but for those of you without an airbrush, you can sponge paint a model and use this same method without the airbrush, and I'll show you more about that later. Now, you can use these products to simulate peeling paint on metal, wood, concrete, practically any type of material that you would simulate in a model. You will need to consider what type of material you're simulating in advance so that you know what type of base coat to apply. In my case, I'm simulating chipping paint on a metal surface, like on the side of a piece of rolling stock. So I'm painting my styrene a base color that is a rust color. If you're modeling a wood structure, you would want to use a base coat that is the color of weathered wood, and so on. I give these test pieces a good coat of the base color, although I leave it a little uneven intentionally, as rust does not typically occur evenly. When the base coat is applied, I allowed it to dry thoroughly, typically a couple hours or so, but honestly, the longer it cures, the better. When the base coat is completely dry, I apply the chipping fluids. In this case, I am applying the heavy chipping fluid to the first test piece and the scratches effects to the second. They are both clear and go on the model relatively the same, but in the bottle the heavy chipping fluid appears thicker. I spray a coat of the fluid on the model that leaves the model completely wet and shiny, but without ponding or producing runs or drips. At this point, I want to allow the fluid to dry thoroughly, at least 30 minutes, but I have allowed it to set for hours before moving on and encountered no problems. When the chipping fluid is dry, I apply my surface coat of paint. This is the paint that I want to model as chipped or scratched. In this case, I'm using a flat, bright yellow. Apply this paint as you normally would until you get the finish that you would want on an unweathered model. Now we want to allow this paint to dry, and how long you let it dry will impact how the effect works. At a minimum, you want the paint to be thoroughly dry to the touch, 45 minutes or so. At this stage of drying, the paint will peel and scratch fairly easily, and you'll tend to end up with larger peeling and scratched patches. If you let the paint cure more fully, it will take a little more work to produce the chipping effect, but your chipping will be more subtle and in smaller patches. I have allowed paint to dry for as long as several days, and though it took a bit more effort to get the effect to begin, the effect that it produced looked just as good. For those of you who do not have an airbrush, you can apply these fluids with a sponge. In my case, I'm using a makeup applicator wedge. I'm using the scratches effects on this piece and simply apply an even coat by dabbing it on with a sponge. When the product is dry to the touch, or longer, as I said before, you can apply the finish coat of paint with a sponge in exactly the same way. I find that paint applied with a sponge tends to need a second coat, so when the first coat was dry to the touch, I applied a second coat. With the top coat of paint dry, I'm ready to produce the effect. I'm starting off with a piece that had the heavy chipping fluid. I work with an inexpensive paintbrush with moderately stiff bristles. I've cropped the bristles to about half of their original length, and I cut into them from the end to produce uneven ends on the bristles. This tool works great for this process, especially for producing scratches in the chipped paint. You may also want to use some pointed tools like a toothpick or the handle of an old micro brush with the brush head removed. I started by applying some clean water to the surface of the model. I want to begin by getting the paint wet, but I find that this process works best if I then remove most of the water. So after the initial application, I dry my brush on a paper towel regularly. Now I begin to brush the model fairly vigorously, and as you see, the paint that was just an hour old begins to peel away fairly quickly. Paint that is cured longer may take a little longer to start, but be patient. It will begin to peel, and if you are too aggressive with it, you may find that it peels more quickly and you have peeled away more paint than you planned to. Again, as you see, the heavy chipping fluid allows large sections of the paint to peel away. This works great on HO or larger scale models, but in most cases I find the heavy chipping fluid produces larger peeling patches than I desire in N-scale. The scratches effects, on the other hand, work in exactly the same way, But as you see here, it produces much smaller scratches and peeling paint patches at a time. My pointed tools work great on this product to simulate, for example, scratches on a boxcar where the door opens and scrapes the paint, or on the side of a covered hopper where equipment has scratched the sides of the car. I am very impressed with the subtle effect of the Scratches Effects product, especially on N-scale as I model. If you find that you've taken off more paint than you desired, you can touch up an effect. I'm using a micro brush in almost a dry brushing technique. I load up some paint, then take most of the paint off on a paper towel and dab it onto the patch. I apply the touch-up paint thinly so that it leaves a worn, faded paint appearance, but it's not so boldly peeled and bare as it was before. For the paint applied with a sponge, I work in exactly the same way. I find, however, that the sponge-applied paint tends to leave less scratching and more of a rash look, as if rust was just beginning to peek through the paint. Of course, the longer you work the paint with the brush, the more the paint is going to peel away and the more intense the effect will be, as you see here. I really like working with these products, and I am very impressed with the weathered paint effects that they produce, whether modeling steel, wood, concrete, or some other material underneath the peeled paint. These fluids are super easy to use, and I think they're worth giving a try. I hope you'll try them out for yourself. I'm really curious to know your opinion of the effects that you saw me get from the scratching and chipping fluids that I use today, both in the airbrush forms and also in using it without airbrush. I'm interested to know what your thoughts are. And if you have not tried this technique, I hope that you'll give it a try. These are some great products that MIG Ammo and others are producing, and I am really impressed with the effects. Just a little bit of practice, and you can do some great chipping and scratching as you weather rolling stock, structures, and other items for your own model railroad layout. Well, if you enjoyed this video today, here's a link to some more weathering videos that I think you'll enjoy as well. I hope that you'll check that out. Also, be sure and take a look in the description down below, where you're going to find a link and that promo code to my new MicroMark affiliate. You're also going to find links to my Amazon page, my Amazon Pick of the Week, my Patreon page, and places that you can connect with me on social media. Well, be sure and join me each Tuesday as I bring you more great model railroad videos, and I look forward to seeing you then. Lizzie?